Hey guys, it's Bowdenbuilt Garage coming back at you with another video today. So today we're going to talk about how you can identify LS blocks, whether it be a 6.2, 5.3 liter, a 4.8, a 6.0, whatever. You can pretty much identify it just by looking at it. And you can identify cylinder heads just by looking at them also. And in today's video, we're going to show you how to do that. So stay tuned. So the first thing we're going to get into is how to identify a LS block just by looking at it. The first thing you're going to see when you look at a LS block, it's going to have either a cam sensor on the front timing cover, or it's not going to have a cam sensor on the front timing cover. That identifies whether it's a Gen 2 or Gen 3 or Gen 4 LS block. Your cam sensor will be on the front if it's a Gen 4. So with that, you can guarantee it's going to be a 58X reluctor, and Gen 3s are going to be 24X reluctor. So this right here is my Gen 3 6 liter. This is technically what would be called a Gen 3.5 6 liter. So it has Gen 4 pistons, Gen 4 rods, but a Gen 3 crank. So it still uses the 24X reluctor crankshaft. And another tattletale sign that you have a Gen 3 motor, see how this has a center bolt? And it's only 3 bolts that hold the throttle body on. But this one here, I mean, this is an electric throttle body, but see how this is 4-bolt throttle body? That's an indication you have a Gen 4. Now, it'll be hard to see it here specifically, but see how there is 1 bolt there, 1 bolt there, and 1 bolt there. That's a 3-bolt. So that would indicate that that is a Gen 3 intake. Probably show you a little bit. The garage is a little messy right now. So 3-bolt Gen 3, 4-bolt Gen 4. That's a good way to identify your intake manifolds. So just remember, rule of thumb is 3-bolt throttle body Gen 3, 4-bolt throttle body Gen 4. That's how you can identify it through intake manifolds, just like I just showed you. Throttle body that has 3 bolts will be a Gen 3, and a throttle body that has 4 bolts is a Gen 4. That's only intake manifold side of it, though. Here, I will get some pictures. This is how you can identify a Gen 3 from a Gen 4 as far as like looking at the block. It's kind of hard to see timing covers sometimes, because normally they'll be covered up by the water pump and they'll be covered up by all of your accessory drives here. So like you'll see it's the alternators covering it, the idler pulley, the water pump, all of that stuff is covering the front timing cover, but a good indication that it's a Gen 3 or Gen 4. So your 5.3s, your Gen 4 5.3s, they came with 799 heads. That's a good way that it'd be indicating that it's a Gen 4. I'll throw some pictures up here too. So this right here is a timing cover for a Gen 4. Now, this over here, right, hopefully it can see me. This over here is a Gen 3 timing cover. That's how you can identify them. You can also identify them by the crank sensor, which is always found on the passenger side of the block. It's right there behind the starter. Sometimes you can just like peek up in there and see it. And this is the picture of a Gen 4. And this is the picture of a Gen 3 crank sensor. So either one. And I always recommend using GM or AC Delco crank sensors because your aftermarket crank sensors will sometimes send a dirty signal, and sometimes it'll make them not run right. Now let's get into how you can identify cylinder heads on LSs. It's really simple to identify LS cylinder heads because you can clearly see nothing's blocking it. You can identify them by the stamp number found on the corner of the cylinder head. Normally you can see it better on the passenger side, I believe, if it's not been messed with, but we'll go ahead and show you that. So I'm going to show you right here on this little 317 that I got sitting here. This is, and I'll show it to you on the car. This is how you identify a cylinder head on an LS. See this stamp number right here, 317. Now this is a rec port cylinder head, 823. That's how you can identify them, just by looking at the cylinder head. They'll always have a stamp number here if it's a stock casting cylinder head. So let's get into it, how you can see it while it's sitting on the car. So on the driver's side, now this motor is a stock 6-liter. See how you can't really see any kind of stamp number because there's coil and injector wiring and all kind of wiring in the way. That's why I usually come to the passenger side. And right down there, you can see the stamp number in the head. That one says 317. Now, this is how you can kind of identify just by looking at a LS if it's a Gen 3 or Gen 4. If you can come down here and sneak by, see how that timing cover doesn't have any kind of cam sensor or anything in it? That's because Gen 3s have the cam sensor in the back. Gen 4s have the cam sensor up front. This is also another tattletale sign that you got a Gen 3. See how that's got a return side on the fuel system, on the fuel rail? It's got a feed and a return. And this is the intake that's going to go on it. See how this has just got a feed? That's because your Gen 4s will have a filter in it that's got a feed and return already built into it, and it's regulated through that filter. I do not have a filter here to show you what that looks like, but I'll put a picture right here of it. And that's how you can tell that's a Gen 4 type system also. So, like I said, it's kind of hard to see sometimes, but you can identify how big the LS is if you can sneak down here. See how that's got a 6-liter stamp right in the cylinder wall? Or, well, I guess you'd say the driver's side of the block. It's right on the side of the cylinder wall, but see how that has a 6-liter stamp in it? And so, as I said, you could see the actual stamp number in the actual engine block. It'll say 60 liter. I'll put a picture here. This is a picture of a 5.3 slash 4.8. You'll see it in the block. Now, that's not all the ways the case. Like if it's sitting in a junkyard, you could probably see it, but if it's sitting down in a car or a truck, it'll be a little harder to see. I recommend like taking a bore scope or something with you to see it. But I'll show you a picture. This is a picture of a stamp number of a 6.2. This is a stamp number of a 5.3 slash 4.8. Now your truck motors are all similar to your car motors. They're all, I mean, everything's stamped in the same way. So whether it be in a car or a truck, it's always going to be in the same spot with LSs. That's why people call them Legos, because everything interchanges with each other most of the time. Now, these 823s I have sitting here, like I wouldn't recommend putting them on anything smaller than a 6.0, just because it don't have the cubic inch to move the airflow that these heads can provide. But we'll get into it and I'll show you, like you got your cathedral port heads that are made for like your smaller cubic inch LSs. These rec ports were made for bigger cubic inch LSs. And just because your bigger cubic inch LSs like your 6.0, 6.2s, 7 liters, all of them, they have the cubic inch to move the airflow through the heads. Now, so now your cathedral port heads, right? You're probably wondering what they came on. So your cathedral ports came on 4.8s, 5.3s, your LS1s, which were 5.7s, and LS6s. They came on 6 liters. Cathedral port heads did not come on 6.2s. And they did not come off on 7 liters either, which is the LS7. LS7s actually had their own specific cylinder head also, but they had a lot of issues with them. I don't know if you guys are real familiar with it. You're probably not, because if you aren't, you probably wouldn't, or if you are, you probably wouldn't be watching this video. LS7s had a bad problem with dropping valves, and when it would drop a valve, it'd pretty much wipe the bottom end out, and then you'd have to get pistons replaced and pretty much a new bottom end. Your 6 liters that came in PPVs, they were reg port headed motors. I believe they came in PPVs and G8s. They were 823 headed motors, so they had a full rec port top end. And they had the same intake as like a Camaro would have with a 6.2. So, I mean, 6.0s are very capable of moving air, just not as good as a 6.2 will. Now, let's talk about cathedral port heads. So your cathedral port heads will be your 799/243s. Your 799s and 243s are essentially the same cylinder head. The valves are just a little bit different in each one, but they got the same combustion chamber. They, the same size intake valves, and I'll put the specs right here. Your 862s and your 706s are also very similar. They came on your earlier 5.3s. They're actually a really good head too. When they're ported, they work really well. I believe they came on 4.8s and 5.3s. Now let's talk about your rec ports. Your rec ports are going to be your 823s and 821s, which I'll put the specs to them here. Your 823s and 821s are very good cylinder heads. If, like I said, you got a 6 liter and up. They also had a cylinder head, I believe it was 5364. That's a rec port that came on truck motors. And I'll put the specs to them here. I believe 821, 823, and 5364s are the same specs as far as the cylinder head goes. Now your LS7s, that's a whole different ballgame. Now, honorable mention, these heads are very expensive, but LSA heads, they're really nice. The casting number to them are 4863. Here's the specs to them here. And GM developed these obviously for boost. They are what came on the LSA engines, what came in 5th gen Camaros. They also came in CTSVs. The LSA engines is a 6.2. It's basically a LS3 with a forged bottom end, really nice cylinder heads, and I can't remember what liter blower it is. I think it's a 1.9. Somebody can fact check me on that. But they are really, really good cylinder heads, but you are going to pay for them. Now, if let's just say, for example, like this car here, this is a 6 liter. Nothing special, came out of like a 05 Silverado. As I said in my previous video, it was a Gen 3.5, which means Gen 4 pistons, Gen 4 rods, Gen 3 crank. This has 317s on it. That's another cathedral port head. They are really, really good for moving air, but the combustion chambers are like 71 cc, so it doesn't do much for compression. Now your 823s are, I believe, 65 cc, but they move even more air than these 317s do, because obviously cathedral port versus rec port, your rec ports are always going to flow more if you have the cubic inch for it. But 4863 LSA heads are very, very expensive. Now, let's just say you're trying to build a budget built boosted motor from 6 liter and up, but you know, you don't have the money for LSA heads. That's where I say 823s really come in handy, because in my previous video I talked about it, I picked them up for 600 bucks and they were fresh from a machine shop. So I mean, that's a pretty good deal trading off. I can't tell you offhand how much LSA heads are, but they are expensive and you're going to pay for them. People know what they got, and that's because that's like a top of the line head for boost with LSs until you get into the whole like aftermarket thing. So I'm going to put a link down in the description of this chart. I use this chart a lot when I first started messing with LSs, just because I didn't know the difference between cathedral port and rec port. But here's the chart here. And this lists all the cathedral port heads, and it'll list the rec port heads and all of it. But my main reason for making this video is I wanted to help you guys identify LS blocks and cylinder heads if you didn't know how. So I hope this video did well for y'all. I hope y'all took some information from it, and I hope you got something out of it. So that was the whole point of making this video, is to help you guys out and understand what you're looking at when you want to get into the LS game. Like I said, man, and a lot of people have said it before, these LSs are like Legos. There's really nothing to them. It's really hard to mess them up, and I believe that's why people swap them into a lot of stuff. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you took something out of it. And if you guys have any questions, don't feel free to ask. I try to answer as many questions as I can about this LS stuff. It's really easy. It's really simple, and and pretty cheap for the most part, as long as you don't try to get crazy with stuff. I know a lot of people claim that, you know, LS swaps are insanely high and the internet lies, but if you really know what you're looking for and you find some good marketplace deals, that's what I always do. They're actually fairly cheap. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you in the next one.